I know it was Friday night in December because I was making pancakes and eggs for supper, and my dad was sitting at the opposite end of the table because I had an electric skillet reading the paper. And my brother comes in from feeding the cattle, and he said that Sister Rosalia asked the 8th graders about going to prep school. And out of my mouth, before I thought it came, maybe I should too. And I started turning pancakes really fast, like, what is going on? And my dad looks up over the paper like, you want to say more? And I didn't want to say another thing. So that was the end of it.
Welcome back to the Cup of Holy Spirit podcast. I am Tom Wynn, and today I'm not joined with our dear friend Daniel. I have the special privilege to be joined with Sister Janice Thome here, who is a part of the Dominican Sisters of Peace and a Ministry of Presence. She's been a religious since 1961. Sister, how has that been like? What are some cool highlights you have just in this past year?
Well, in this past year, what has happened is that the other sister that helped start the ministry with me is retiring as of the end of December. And so I have been doing 2 half-time ministries, our ministry with the poor, half-time, and then half-time for pay, teen parent educator with parents as teachers, helping the teenage moms and dads be able to grow into parenthood. And so now I have quit that so I can be in our ministry with the poor full-time and do what both of us were doing.
I think there's a big misconception that we think religious sisters just stay in their room and pray all day and go to church. But I think to see you and Sister Rosarita always out and always being so active, I think that really flipped a switch for me as I was growing in my faith of, wait a second, being a religious is more than just praying. Like that's the big part, but what else would you say is key and fundamental for that sphere of religious sister?
Well, what you saw is what the Holy Spirit led us to. Back in Vatican II time, they had documents that they sent out. And so there was one on peace and justice, Pacem in Terris, peace on earth. And our community studied each of these documents. And on that, we had meetings every 4 years for re-elections of our leadership and things like that. And we were led over, I think it was 3 different times, to look at what that could mean. And so the first time, I was teaching at the time, and so whatever you were doing, whatever the person that you worked with was poor and you were to help them. Well, I had kids that blew up. They didn't know how to manage their emotions. And so really working with that student or kid with a very poor self-image, trying to help them believe in themselves. And then we went into, well, maybe we need to start thinking about going deeper, helping the kid who was in a poor family. And then the next time we decided that we were going to set aside 2 full-time equivalent positions to our sisters with no pay so that our community was doing something very real to help poor people.
I think those moments are very difficult, to transition into. Were these moments along the lines of, did you always feel like this is what you desired, of being ordered what to do whenever you were supposed to and having to take orders? Because I think that's the beauty of religious life, is practicing the virtue of obedience. And I feel like there's beauty and joy in that. But I have a sense that's not always what you desired, Sister Janice.
Well, when we entered, what you said is correct. You knew that you were going to say, yes, Mother General, or yes, Major Superior, yes to the local superior, whatever they said. And as a teacher, every May or June, whenever school ended, you packed everything up because you could be sent someplace else.
Oh.
Okay? And you had your face and your hands showing and nothing else. So that's what I started with. And then with Vatican II, all of that changed step by step by step. And so back in 1994, when we had our chapter in the summertime, we made that decision to do the 2 positions full-time. And we decided over the New Year's weekend, we would have a discernment process on what that would look like. So anybody that was interested in being a part of setting this up, or in doing it should be at that. So I was very interested in it. And I thought, when I get too old to teach, I'll do it. So we went through this whole process. And what we ended up with is saying, okay, the ministry will be called the ministry of presence, because you are to be present to the person that's poor, find out what they need, help them find it if it already exists, and if it doesn't exist, invent it. Wow. Find a way to help them in need. Okay, so then we did, who wants to be a part of this? And I'm thinking, okay, by the time I'm 60, I'm teaching teenagers. They aren't going to believe I'm worth anything. And so, in the future, I'll do it. Well, 10 of us put our names in. By the time we got to the time to meet and start making decisions, 4 of them were out of it. And so, I told them what I said, and that was all okay. And then everything changed for me, because I thought that I was going to be at some point helping my mom and dad when one of them was ill. Well, my dad got ill and he died. And so I was free at that point. I had been in Oklahoma City teaching for 6 years at Bishop McGinnis High School, and there was no other Dominican there anymore. So I wanted to come back to Wichita, where my parents were, and help my mom care for my dad, but he ended up dying. And so it ended up that there were 3 of us that decided we would like to do it. And unfortunately, the other one ended up with a health issue that she ended up dying. So it was just Sister Rosarita and I.
Wow.
Back at that time when we were doing the discernment of how many people and where to do it, we decided on Garden City, because our sisters helped start the hospital in 1931, and we had taught at both Catholic schools, and people trusted us. Plus, there was a higher number of people below poverty line in Garden City than there was in Wichita. That was 10 times bigger. And so we felt like we would be trusted by the people that could help us help others, and it would all work out. Then they told us that over half the people you serve will be speaking Spanish, which was true right then. So you're going to have to learn Spanish. And we didn't realize this because the research hadn't told us yet. When we started to learn Spanish, we took a 1 semester Spanish class at the college. Then we went to Mexico, to Guanajuato, because it's not too much influenced by the Western culture, to learn Spanish 4 hours a day in classes. And we lived separately with families so we could see the family interaction and need to use our Spanish. Now, what we didn't know then is that we could learn Spanish easier because we're both good at math. If you think of the symbol, this symbol, and what it means, you go to each side of your brain to do it. So you're going English, Spanish, that helps. Now, I haven't used mine as much as Sister Rosarita has, so mine is not as good. But I talk it slower, so they have time to go like this with it, and my verbs will never have the right endings. But anyway, so they came back, and what we were told that when we did that discernment is that you needed to find out all the services that were available. Mm-hmm. So you didn't duplicate. You knew who to take them to or who to refer them to. What we didn't realize is that gave everybody else that was already here the knowledge that we were going to be here, so that when they had somebody they couldn't help, they could refer them to us. So we came back from Mexico and we started getting references already. So that worked out really well. But the funny thing is, or the precious thing, I guess I should say, the precious thing is that in these 29 and a half years, I've helped people born in 34 different countries in the middle of nowhere in western Kansas.
I think to see that is hard for me to believe. I think it's such a mass scale of how many people you've helped. I'm really curious to know if it was easy.
Easier than I thought it was going to be.
In what way?
Because we didn't know how to do anything at the beginning, but we didn't have to know. It just developed on its own, and God's the one that set it up, I think. What's difficult for me is when the person either wants everything that you can't do or is so damaged that you feel like you're only touching the very beginning of things. But because we've done it long enough, you can see instances where it's made the whole difference in the world. And my best example is a family that I started back in probably 1998 or something like that. I was in court with a lady that spoke only Spanish, and I was telling her what the judge was saying to the person before her so she'd get some kind of an idea. Well, this couple was sitting over on the other side of that aisle, and they decided after we got through with her case that they would ask me if I could stay and do that for them. And I said, okay, I would do that. I would take her home and I would come back. So I did. Well, then I had to have them take me to their house because I had to have my car in the repair shop. Go to their house. It's a triplex, 3 little tiny apartments, and they had 2 kids, and this girl was 7 at that time, and I didn't know anything about the family, but I offered to bring them food boxes from Emmaus House, and at that time it was 3 times a week, and so they were very grateful. And then I did other things like help them with the utility bill, get them some furniture or whatever. And I didn't know till they had moved out to a trailer park, so they were doing a little better. And I didn't know probably for about those first 5 years that he was a severe alcoholic and beater.
Wow.
And so one day she had called me to come and take her to the doctor for her after the delivery, child in her checkup. And so I did. When she came out, she said that they said she had a sexually transmitted disease. So she had to have her husband come in and get checked. So she said, I don't want you to come in. I will have him come out. I'll tell him. Well, then she sent the oldest child out to tell me that he didn't want to go. And I said, well, I'll come in, and then I should come in. So I came in and I told him, you have got to go or they might send the police after you. Now, when you don't have documents, that makes you do it. So he got in the car and wouldn't say a word. So I take him there, and he wanted to just go in. I said, no, I'm going in with you because I need to tell them to call me when you're finished.
Right.
Oh, no, I'll go ahead and walk. And I said, well, if something comes up that you decide not, I still want them to know because I didn't want him to walk off and not go in. So anyway, time goes on, and he's the cause of the disease, of course. And then he got drunk one night very badly, and he was going to come at her again to beat her. And she was scared, so she pulled the mirror off the wall and put it between him. And he saw his angry face in the mirror and turned around and left.
Wow.
And he didn't come back for a while. And so that's the kind of mess that it was. And then she lived alone, and the kids started getting old enough to have a job and so forth. Well, this oldest girl at age 7, when she had her first child, she knew what I did, so she had me help her. Okay, fast forward, the second child is age 3, and when I'm working with his younger sibling, if he does something he shouldn't do, she would turn to him and say his name and wouldn't say another word till he looked at her. And she'd say, you better not do that again, or she'd say, you'd better do that. He would stand there, and you could tell his little brain was trying to figure out what to say or do. And if he knew he was going to blast open in anger, he would go to his room until he calmed down. If he could take it and stop it or do it, he'd do it and keep going. So that's the discipline she had instead of the beating and the yelling Dad had. So you make a difference for darn sure.
So as I hear these stories, it's hard for me not to imagine the kind of the dichotomy that you're kind of having to face with of like, Lord, like I am so into you and I'm so fully in love with you, but it is really difficult for me to see these people in very difficult situations. And then he's calling you, of all people, to serve and be his arms and feet. What emotion does that stir in you? How do you receive the confidence to say, yes, Lord, I am not worthy enough, but I know that you were using me well?
One thing that helps me to be able to minister during some really explosive or difficult type situations is the way I grew up. My parents never yelled at us. I'm so old, it's before TV, so I didn't know people could yell at other people. And if I did something wrong, they would say, Janice, and wouldn't say another word until I looked them eyeball to eyeball, and they'd say, you'd better not do that again, or you'd better do that. And you knew that's the way it was going to be. And so that, I think, has me calmer on the inside than anything else. And I had students sometimes that would get angry because I wouldn't yell back at them. And my funniest story is a kid that was a senior in high school, and I had him in a religion class, and he would ask questions out of the clear blue sky that didn't have anything to do with what the day's lesson was. But if I knew the answer, I'd answer him. And if I didn't, I'd say, I'll tell you tomorrow, I'll look it up. Well, it was May, and graduation was coming. And one day he just ratcheted it up like crazy, and I kept answering calmly. So he started up the aisle, getting louder. And I'm thinking, I don't know if he's going to hit me or not, but I just kept going. Finally, about 3 steps away from me, he said, can't even have a decent argument with you. I said, I know, I never learned to argue. And the whole class cracked up. Well, after the class was over, 2 of the students came and said, he's succeeded in getting every other teacher, no matter what type of class it was, to cry or yell back at him. And he can't do that with you. And so he's messing up, and he won't have another chance.
I feel like, sister, that you should write a book on temperance and on not being argumentative, because I think those are facets of any ministry, whether that be the public sector or the private sector. I think those are the moments that test who we are the most. Are we willing to crumble and reveal the concupiscence in us? Or are we willing to offer the grace within us? And I don't know how you did it, I think.
Well, and the other piece, I would ask God, now what do I say? Now what do I do while he's doing his thing? What was funny after that, though, is that when we were practicing for graduation, he was in jail.
Wow.
The local police had been waiting for his 18th birthday because his parents bailed him out of everything. Well, he and another student were up painting on the water tower of the town. So he got arrested, and he had to be in jail and go through the process, whatever it was, until he could get released before he went to court. He got released in time to be at graduation, but that's it. So I was like, oh dear.
Knucklehead. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I just say, God, help me to know the next word or action, or to stop saying or doing anything. Because like I have this one guy that's 43 going on 13, and probably was on autism spectrum before it was ever invented. And he wants everything all the time. Well, we have limits. We can give $100 once a year for your utilities, not every 3 months.
Right.
And so I just keep saying, God, help me be calm, but keep the guidelines. Or God, give me the next word when somebody's all upset. How can I help them find any kind of peace or whatever? Because most often it's beyond your ability to fathom what they're going through.
It is hard to imagine. And as I transition here, it's snowing today in Garden City. And I don't know if you remember, a year ago, you were in a coffee shop and you shared a story of your father driving his tractor in the snow to go to Mass.
Right.
I think that has stuck with me since I first heard it, of a father who is so willing to sacrifice the cold, to sacrifice everything just to make sure he can receive the Lord. And I would love to hear how it was growing up for you and how you eventually came to see and hear the Lord and answer that call.
Well, it's going to be a long story.
I love long stories.
The beginning of it would be, my parents were very faithful Catholics. That was their life in their own home, and they kept it that way. We lived on a farm halfway between the airport in Wichita and Goddard, and it's about 2.5, 3 miles away from the little town of Schulte. So we went to church at the Catholic Church in Schulte and went to school at the Catholic school there. Now, at that time, when I graduated, I was one of 9.
Wow.
Now they have over 500 kids there because young families are moving west of Wichita with kids, and so it's just continues to get bigger and bigger. And the parish has built two different churches over time from the little thing we went to church in. And so my parents had some really hard times. Dad thought it was the water. It could be the water when my mother had her second miscarriage. Wow. He took the water into the water department, and they said, no, it's fine. Well, when the cows started having them, then he took it to K-State, and they found that gypsum was being absorbed in it. So we probably had bottled water before anybody ever invented it.
Very fancy.
And Dad made a big tin thing that he had put in his truck and went to Goddard and filled it for the cows and filled this big glass, huge thing. It's probably bigger than the ones that they do now, and brought it home for us. But during that time, it was so difficult because going through miscarriage after miscarriage, you know, you have 5 kids and you lose 4 more. Wow. It just feels awful. And so they struggled. They had Father come over, all kinds of things, but never ever doubted God. And so that was just always a part of everything. Church every Sunday. As a freshman, I went to high school at what is now the Newman College. They had it was called Sacred Heart College and Sacred Heart High School. So as a freshman, I was there. So, you know, went to Mass every day during the week at that time. So, and that's what we did at Schulte at that time too. So faith was just a part of everything. God was just important. That's all there was to it. And then you ask about my vocation story, and it's crazy. It makes no sense until you live out the whole mess and turn around and look back on it. I was taught by Dominican Sisters, grades 1 through 8. In grade 7, our teacher had to have a mastectomy. So she was in the hospital and recovering, and the priest at that time took over for the 2 weeks. He had taught Greek in the seminary. He had no idea what to do with 7th and 8th graders. So he'd invent these things that made us busy. So one day we were to write a paragraph about what we wanted to be when we grew up. So I'm sitting there thinking, I've never thought of it. I'll just write whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
So the next day, to kill more time, he called us all up one by one to talk.
Oh my goodness.
So I get up there and he said, you know, you can be more than one of these at a time. I said, I know. And I told him why I had him there. And then he said, yeah, you can be a sister and a teacher, a sister and a nurse, a sister and a med tech. Now, I don't remember why I knew med techs existed, but anyway. And I'm standing there thinking, and you're not saying married and all of these. So I just said again, I don't know what I want to be, so that's why I wrote him there. So he let me go. So
you were 14 at the time, freshman year, 13.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the next time that my dad went to a men's meeting, after the meeting, Father asked him to stay back. So he said, I think that Janice wants to be a sister, but she thinks she can't because your wife's been so sick and she's been needed as the oldest child in the family to do so much. My dad said, well, she's never talked about it. And he said, well, that's probably why, etc. So Dad goes home and talks to Mom, and they decide, because whatever is in my brain comes out of my mouth, that Father's just making too much of something.
Yeah.
So they decided just forget about it. Okay, so the next step is 8th grade. And in 8th grade, you always went as girls to the convent in Great Bend for Vocation Day in October. Well, happy-go-lucky kind of person, I'm getting to see where the sisters came from.
Right.
And that's all that was in my brain. So we get in the 2 cars full and go on up there. And so I came home talking about what I saw and some of the sisters that used to be there that were now older and not out and teaching anymore. They just, listened, and that was it. Okay, so in December, when Sister Rosario was ready to go back to Great Bend for Christmas, she called all of us 8th grade girls out in the hall. If you want to go to prep school next year, I can get your enrollment form to apply for it. And so I'm just standing there, and a couple of the girls say no, and I'm saying, well, not now, but I'm not saying never. And that just came to my mind.
Yeah.
Well, she took it again, like Father did. So she talks to my mother. So Mom and Dad talk about it again, and they decide that they're going to tease me about it and see what my reaction is, because then they could figure it out, because they don't want to make anything pressure at all. my dad teased us about all kinds of stuff. So he'd tease about it, and I'd laugh, and they decided that they knew what they were talking about. Okay, so then at graduation, we always graduated at Mass, and all of our family members were there and everything. So we go home and have lunch at our house, because back then you didn't go out to restaurants. There weren't any around the area. And so it's my dad's family and my mom's family and all of us in our house. My dad's dad wouldn't let them go to high school because he said kids that went to high school became lazy loots. And so his part of the family thought everything was over. So they started asking me, what do you want to be now that you graduated from school? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about it. I said, well, I don't know yet. Well, you got to start thinking about it. And on their side, that made sense. So that night, I'm laying in bed and thinking, I'm supposed to know already, and I haven't thought about it. And I don't even know how to think about it. So a neat way out of it that I figured out was every time I went to communion, I would ask God, when it's time to make that decision, help me make the right decision. That way I'm doing something for the future, but I don't have to worry about it.
I see.
Okay, so in the summer is Sunday, and then I went to high school at a Catholic high school in Wichita, so it was 5 days a week, and Sunday, same thing. So we go through that part of the year. December, Sister Rosalia says the same thing to the 8th graders. I know it was Friday night in December because I was making pancakes and eggs for supper, and my dad was sitting at the opposite end of the table because I had an electric skillet, reading the paper. And my brother comes in from feeding the cattle, and he said that Sister Rosalia asked the 8th graders about going to prep school. And out of my mouth, before I thought it came, maybe I should too. And I started turning pancakes really fast, like, what is going on? And my dad looks up over the paper like, you want to say more? And I didn't want to say another thing. So that was the end of it. So then the mother and dad are thinking, okay, she really wants to do it, but she's afraid that because mother's been so sick so much that she can't. And I'm thinking, oh, they forgot it.
They did.
So Sunday morning, after we get out of church, we're on the way to the little grocery store, which we stopped by after church on Sunday to get the few things that we didn't grow or whatever ourselves. And my dad said, did you talk to Sister Rosalia? And I said, I didn't know I was supposed to. He said, well, if you want to go to prep school, you need to, don't you? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, she didn't forget. So I'm sitting there in the car. What do I do about this? So I decided, well, I could always get it and not fill it in.
Right.
Because I'm not really ready to make that decision. So when he gets back in the car, I said, yes, I guess I'll go. So I go up to and ring the doorbell, and Sister Rosalia was the superior. She answers the door, and I tell her what I want, and she leaves me standing in the cold and goes and gets the other 3 sisters because they're so happy. She's so happy about it because she is so happy about it. So we sit in their visiting parlor, and we talk about it, and so it's all okay. She's going to do that, and she'll send it home with my brother when she gets back. So I'm walking out of the door and thinking, they weren't surprised. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Because I'm surprised. But anyway, it was the time you still wore hats. And I'm in my fancy shoes for my graduation, and the wind blows my hat off. And so I walk across the little parking lot in front of the convent into the plowed field that the hat is in. I'm coming back with my shoes that came off in the mud, muddy feet, muddy hat, saying, this was a mistake. Forget it. Okay, so time goes by. Ed brings the thing home from Sister Rosalia to fill out. Well, I didn't fill it out for a while. I just let it sit.
Why did you let it sit? What made you not want to fill it out right away?
Because I wasn't sure I really wanted to do anything like that. And so I prayed, does God want me to do it or does God not want me to do it? And I decided I would pray every communion. So I kept praying on that. And finally decided I'm going to go try it out and get it over. Either I'll be going into the convent or I won't, but I won't be like this, thinking, is it supposed to be or not?
Right.
So I filled it out, and my parents were okay with that, and they could have said no, because Mother's health hasn't been good and we need you here. But they didn't say no. They decided that they needed to be open to it. So that fall, I go to prep school, and 3 months into it, I knew this was right for me. It just 3 months. So I went home for Thanksgiving and talked to them about it. And Dad said, why didn't you wait a bit? You just been there 3 months. Okay, Christmas, go the same. Well, after Christmas, we had, at the end of the semester in mid-January, a 3-day retreat. I was just so absolutely sure. Okay, so after the retreat, I write a letter home, and I let them know that this retreat made me very sure that this is what I wanted to do. Could I please get an application to enter? So my parents received that, and they sent a letter that said, yes, you may go and apply. So I go over to the Mother House the same day that I got it and get the application and write a letter to them, thanking them for that acceptance, and that I'd bring it home when I came home for Easter. Now, unbeknownst to me, my dad had started another letter saying, we'd like for you not to apply until May. Give yourself a little more time. But I never was told that till about 10 years after I entered the convent, because he didn't want me to know that he was still worried about it.
Yeah.
Because the water was fine. My mother had the baby in May and could have died from it because she had a blood vessel leaking and everything, but she didn't. The baby was fine. We were all worried about the baby. We weren't worried about her. And the actual day that I was to leave prep school at the end of May was the day, that night before he had been born. And so the two ladies whose daughters were in prep school a year younger than me came up to get me, and they were saying, what if she asked about her mother? What were we going to say? And they said, well, we're just telling her about the baby's born, so she knows that, and we hope she doesn't ask. Well, I wasn't worried about Mother because she had always been fine, but the baby was going to be okay since the others weren't. Oh, yeah, the baby's just fine. The doctor tested him out and everything. So I get home, and there's this letter on the desk that says, Janice, wave me in when you get here. And that's what we'd always done with a towel out with Dad was working in the field. He gets in and sets me down and tells me the whole story, that my mother was so close to death by the time the baby was born. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, to have lost her would have been terrible. And then I'm thinking, and I wouldn't be entering either. I'd be staying home and helping the family.
Right.
So it was like a gift out of God all the way around. And so I entered then that fall in 61, just turning 16.
Just turning 16. I'm tearing up because my dad had a stroke. It was the best thing that had ever happened to our family, because it was like the Lord asking me, there are skills and traits of where you should be and at what time. And Daniel and I and a couple of friends went to Rome last week, and while we were there, we encountered a lot of amazing and gigantic big name saints. And I think a lot of them have a very strong dialogue with the Lord. And as I'm hearing your story, Sister Janice, you said that you prayed every communion. And I was waiting, anticipating and the Lord answered. So was it more of a quiet pull, or was it a loud cymbals banging and saying, this is what your heart desires? Or was it more of a slow draw? Well, over the time that I did that praying, it was just God, lead me. I didn't have anything really going on other than my openness. And so during that retreat, I can't give you any words for it. I just knew that this is what I was to do. Do you think the moments that you blurted that things out was the Lord speaking through you? It had to be. It had to be. There's no other reason for it. God set me up good. Yeah. Because that second time gave the idea to my parents that there was something real going on, even though I didn't know there was anything real going on. Something that I always see within you and Sister Rosarita is such a willingness to say yes. And I think that for young people, like especially myself, like I'm very egocentric. I'm very, very goal driven. And so when someone tells me or asks me to do something, if it doesn't align with what I want, I'm quick to say no. And I think those are traits I should grow in. But how do you wake up and say, Lord, today or this past week has sucked? You shared so many stories that are very difficult, dealing with difficult people, but you recognize the Lord in them. So how do you break through those very stagnant and burnouts of ministry?
Well, whenever I feel overstressed by a situation or whatever, it's always a part of my prayer. As religious, we spend 30 minutes in contemplative, private time with God, and say, or when I'm ready to go to bed at night, say, God, please help me sleep so I can get beyond the stress of today and be ready for tomorrow's people that I will be interacting with. And I think that because we meet the persons in their homes or wherever it is that they need us to be to help, we see their side of things in a way that you don't see if you're sitting at a desk. And so it becomes more personal on the inside of you than, oh, come into my office and I'll give you a check type of thing.
Right.
And so it's something that I think I grew into step by step, finding a way to put them and myself in God's hands for what the next step would be, or how to heal from that inner pain that I saw with this person.
Yeah, I think that's really hard as a young person to hear. I think, but it's really inspiring to know that my role is simply to love, and my role means that to love, especially when it's hard to love. And I think that religious life offers that contemplativeness to say, I can take a step away from the world just a little bit, and in a very different form. I'm sure married couples can do the same, but I think it's very different. So as a young person like myself, what would you offer to us of how can we better listen and answer the Lord's call? And whether that be religious life, whether that be marriage, of simply being elastic and pulled in the direction that the Lord desires for us to be in.
I think it's hard to put into words, but because I have a lifestyle that includes morning prayer, evening prayer, Mass, the contemplative time, it's like that's woven into the whole schedule, if you want to call it that, of your life. And so when something is hard to work through or be in, you got time right that same day several times to bring it with God. And, sometimes like with that man I talked about earlier that's so immature for his age, just say, Holy Spirit, give me some words or some idea of what to say, because he would want money all the time.
Yeah, but you also have to be responsible in loving him.
Right.
Yeah. And as we close up, do you have any last thoughts on religious life in general, or the mission, or anything that you feel is important to offer?
Well, just like if you listen to all the different pieces, the religious life I entered is not where we are now. And if you go back in history, religious life started as contemplative. You were in your convent and people had to come there if you were going to serve them. Okay, so over the centuries and continuing now into the future, religious life is changing. So I pray that whatever the form is that God wants, we are able to grow into that in the future. Back when I entered, you could be a teacher or a nurse. Well, I didn't like blood, so I was going to be a teacher. Okay, now most religious are not doing those things, or if they are, it's a specialty area. And they're doing much more pastoral types of things, like pastoral care in hospitals or parishes, or cares with the poor like we are doing. It's a lot of different ways. Some centers for children that come from damaged families or need some extra help. They have centers for after school where they can go and have healthy interchange and get the developmental help that they need educationally, or help strengthen their emotional stability and things like that. So religious life has changed and it's going to continue.
Yeah, and I'm sure most people recognize one big change is not having to wear a habit.
That was a big change for sure.
And so I think that opens and broadens the horizon to how women, young gals, view religious life, not as a cloistered nun primarily, but also in many different facets. So thank you, Sister Janice, for offering a piece of your inner world and how the Lord has pulled you quietly and other times loudly and not by your choice. And we are so grateful. So please know that Sister Janice is praying for you. I'm praying for you. Daniel is also praying for you guys. And we will catch you guys on the next episode.